for Ward 4, and Reggie is the councilwoman from Ward 2. Members of the administration, Ward 3, sorry. The Parks and Rec Director, Jensen Worley, City Engineer is in the back on the bench. Our Clerk of Council is in the back as well. A Service Director, Nino is here. Police Chief Ed Kinney is here, and of course the Mayor is right here as well. So with that introduction that we had, and I think some interesting information already from the state, I would like to hear some comments from anybody who would like to speak. To go ahead. Bruce, you're in the back. If you want to start, you just need to go to the microphone in the back and just give your name and address to the clerk. Thank you.
Bruce Gold, 407 Providence Drive. Mr. Westerfield, could you tell us what I've got two questions. Could you tell us what the prime population habitation of deer in a rural setting is per square mile? And the second part is, can you address the effects of quote unquote deer birth control?
Yep. So, the prime deer population in a rural habitat, in general, as an agency, in general, a number is like 20 deer per square mile. Stop. We manage no different from a state, much like I just explained how we look at it from a targeted deer removal standpoint. How we manage deer in Ohio is we look at two surveys. We survey hunters and we survey farmers and ask them the exact same question. Same question I just told you what we would do on a survey to residents. Do you want to see more deer, less deer, or about the same? And we take those by county where we try to intersect those two lines, right? In general, farmers are going to want less deer. In general, hunters are going to want more deer. So we try to manage from an attitude basis of meeting as best we can both of those groups.
No, I understand that, but my question more pertains to in a rural population, you're trying to shoot for around that 20 to 23 deer per square mile. What do we have in Medina?
In the town of Medina?
Yeah.
You're way, 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 way over 20 deer per square mile.
Thank you. Can you also address the effects of the deer birth control?
Sure. So there's a couple different shoots, I guess, if you want to call that, with birth control. I don't want to say it old school because there's still some stuff, research out there, but was looking at PZP or, of giving the deer some type of something to make them infertile. That research has gone on for a long time. There's still ongoing research out there looking at it. Still nothing that's come out that's like, this is the cat's meow, like, bam, silver bullet, we found the answer. The second shoot is through physical sterilization, and whether that be through bucks, which is not, you get at a population through the females, so that's where most of the research is at, is dealing with the females. So there's two shoots that you can look at from a birth control standpoint. Again, lots and lots of research for decades has gone on with birth control. Lots and lots of research still ongoing with fertility control with deer, and it's all still in the research phase. We had a project in Southwest Ohio that did some fertility control down there where they sterilized does down there. That project is done. I won't speak to that project specifically because that wasn't a project that I oversaw. But then right now, currently, we have a project in northeast Ohio in South Euclid looking at a sterilization project up there as well. That project is a combined targeted deer removal and sterilization together, looking at, can we quickly drop this population and then while we add in the sterilization, kind of maintain it at that level. One of the things to keep in mind when you talk about fertility control is that there's no tall fence around Medina. There's no big walls around Medina. Deer come and go. And ironically enough, and you know, you guys are probably, you know, one of the first to hear this data, because like I said, it started last week, but you know, with that project up there, there's 60 does that were sterilized. They all have ear tags. Well, the beauty of having ear tags is that we can follow these deer, right? And so one of those deer, we've had a lot of those deer that have left South Euclid. Most of them stayed within a half mile of the city limit, but they were outside the city limits. They were caught inside the city, but have been spending a lot of time outside. But then things changed this past week and a half. We had a deer pop up in Shaker Heights, which was, okay, about 2 miles away. Interesting, but, you know, not anything crazy. I mean, deer could walk 2 miles pretty easy. Then that deer ended up popping up all the way over in Brooklyn, you know, over in Cleveland. So that, as the crow flies, is 11.2 miles from the study area, and I'm sure it didn't go in a straight line because it went south to Shaker before it went across. And then actually I got another report of and there was 2 deer that did that, and then I've got another report that came in yesterday of 2 more deer that are down in North Randall, so it's about 4.5 miles from the edge of the study area. So, you know, when we look at fertility control, it is all research-based. So, you know, again, with this South Euclid project, what we're looking at from a research standpoint is, can we quickly knock that population down with targeted deer removal, and then, you know, add in that sterilization and maintain that herd.
Can you quickly address the problem with the sterilization and the estrus cycle of does and how that affects it?
Well, yeah, so, you know, again, research, right? So one of the questions we have with these deer that have walked a long way out of South Euclid is why? Now, we're, you know, a week out, so I can't answer that question today. And you know, and as a biologist, as a, you know, researcher, we can only make the best guesses that we can of understanding why what's doing what they're doing. Is it a situation because that doe is not going into estrus and she is not having fawns, now doesn't feel an affinity to that site? Could be. Is it that maybe she had fawning areas, right? If we walk outside right now and see a doe standing out in the yard, how many of you can tell me that's the same doe or not the same doe as the doe that was in your yard when you left your house? You can't. With ear tags, that provides us a little research opportunity to try to maybe understand that a little bit more. So if these deer left and we see them come back to South Euclid, then these are obviously deer that are, you know, leaving and coming back. Understanding why, you know, is a question out there, but one of those could be is that they fawn somewhere else, but they come back into that area. So
specifically, my question is asking, can you explain how they come into estrus here in Ohio around the first week of November? And if they aren't impregnated in that first estrus cycle, what happens?
Yeah,
and consecutive.
So interesting study out of Cornell looking at, I think, kind of where you're going with this. So they did see a reduction in the doe population, but it all got replaced with bucks. And so, you know, those does aren't in estrus, so those bucks aren't running around looking for those does, but they see an opportunity there, voided space, they moved in. So yeah, you know, one of the things that we as researchers look at when we look at, you know, any type of, you know, especially fertility control is, are we changing the behavior of that animal, you know, to be an abnormal thing? Because we don't want to, you know, obviously have negative impacts on people, right? That's why FDA does studies on COVID vaccines for a long time, well, maybe somewhat long time, you know, or whatever vaccine it is, to make sure, you know, what are the adverse, you know, effects that this could have. You know, we know that, you know, some of the, you know, the drugs that are used, like kind of like PZP, don't have a lot of major changes in the behavior, but when you look at sterilization, yeah, you do run into situations where you're changing some of the physiology of that doe, and she's not going into estrus, not having fawns, not having that situation laid out in front of her of what she would
I
normally
guess I
have.
was asking more about the fact that a deer does have an estrus cycle. She doesn't get impregnated in the first cycle. 28 days later, she comes back in. And if you were using a birth control method, you would have to get that same doe let's call it a shot, for lack of a better term, a shot every 28 days, and you have to make sure that you're getting that same doe getting one shot. And you can't identify those does, like you said in your study, without the deer ear tags. So my point, I guess, is the fact that you have to do this in a population that is uncontrolled because there are no large fences surrounding the entire city. And you found that as the ODNR had a problem with the park in Polaris when they tried this in the, I believe it was the mid-'80s, with a 65-acre compound that did have a fence, and ODNR was not able to contain that population in a controlled situation.
That was Columbus Metro Parks that did that project, but correct, yeah. I mean, again, if fertility control was the answer, people would use it. There is not a researcher that you'll reach out to that says this is the silver bullet, this fixes your problem. The research continues, and that's why it's research-based. So from a deer management standpoint, how the Division of Wildlife kind of tackles fertility control with deer is that if you have a novel research project that you want to present, certainly we're open to looking at what that research project is, and if it's something we think is a valid research project, we'll look to permit it. But keep in mind that those projects don't come at a zero cost. They typically come at a pretty hefty sum, and again is a situation where you're addressing, you're trying to fix a future problem because we're not immediately reducing that population. The theory and the hope is that by doing whatever it is through fertility control, that over time that population slowly reduces. I will tell you that one of the interesting things, so to your point of repeat doses, you don't have to go every 28 days, but the research even in that continues to try to make it the longer stretches, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, multiple years. Is that in that Columbus Metro Parks project, there was a doe that she was tagged with the ears, so they know how many whether they had got her with the extra dose or not. Much like us carrying vaccine cards, but she was 16 years old. So when you deal with urban situations, you don't have any control other than cars. Deer can live long lives in an urban setting where food isn't a limiting resource because we all have lots of yummy stuff in our flower beds. That's why generally you're looking at some type of population reduction. That's why that project in South Euclid, that's why we said, hey, that's where we see some novelty here is to reduce that population and then see if we can maintain it with the
Thank you.
fertility. Yep.
Thank you. Who else would like to go next? Lila?
Gosh, I don't know where to begin. I have many issues or concerns. So I guess I'll just start with, I feel like most of our discussion has been focused on killing the deer, not on alternative methods to save them, and deal with the population that we have at hand. So I'd like to spend a lot of time, or at least time tonight, exhausting all of alternative methods. I'll back up and say that one of my biggest concerns is the safety for our community and other pets. We talked about a bunch of different killing scenarios where your neighbors can do it, maybe in parks can do it. In either case, one of my big concerns there is children and pets maybe you shoot the deer with an arrow and then the deer runs into the street, causing a motor vehicle accident, which shouldn't be counted against the deer at that point, right? That's a huge concern I have. So I guess back to the vaccine, I've done some research there. So South Euclid's program does seem to be pretty successful. They sterilized 61 deer. You had mentioned a few of them fleeing South Euclid and going other places, but really you only talked about 4 of them, so that's about 5%. So I would say 95% of the population of those deer that were sterilized have remained there. So I would say that's a pretty good success rate. I also did a little research on that PZP vaccine, and that runs $24 per dose. So when I look at that, that seems like a more financially logical spend versus $600 or $800 to remove the carcass of the deer that's then left behind if we choose to kill them. So I guess from a financial standpoint, that's something to consider. From a humane standpoint, I think sterilization is an option to go with. I do know that South Euclid also used a program through that White Buffalo Incorporated company or division where they applied for a grant, and instead of sterilizing the deer, they stunned them and then took them in to be sterilized completely. So it wasn't a 3-year program, they're sterilized for the long haul. So I don't know if our city's looked at writing a grant for that, but that might be something to consider as well. So I guess that's it. I don't know, I had a million questions when I was sitting there, but I guess my last question is, you talked about like safely killing the deer. I don't know how you guarantee safety or how you can guarantee that that shot deer is not going to cause a traffic accident, or you're not going to shoot my cat on accident, or a child. So safety is a huge concern, and I don't know that anyone can say I'm 100% guaranteeing you safety. So that's
Do you
it.
mind if I address each of her points there?
Yeah.
No, I'm sure she'd like to hear the answers.
Okay. So on, you had mentioned on, I don't know, you said 95% of those deer were still in town there. So the thing with South Euclid to keep in mind is, so they shot deer in the winter of 2020, and then they shot deer in the winter of 2021, so this past winter. Then in December is when they did the sterilization. So we are fresh out the gate on that. So we can't say there's any results out of that project whatsoever.
Excuse me, Jeff, I just want to make, you said shot, you meant culled?
Call, yes.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
Yep, sharpshooting, yep. So we're fresh out the gate on that research project, still lots of time left to look at that project to see what's going on. But what I do is I take in reports that people have, see the tagged deer, and whether they're in town or out of town, I take the report in. And so far, since they finished up in the end of December, so, we're at, 4.5 months now, I've got 142 reports. 106 of the 142 are outside of the project area of South Euclid. So it doesn't mean that they left in there, and that's, again, because again, some of them are right on the edges, but just given some of the data that's tied to that. Time will tell as we see what happens with these deer and as more reports come in. When you look at the $24 per dose, correct, the price for the drug is not expensive. The price to administer it is. And so when you add in costs for capturing and the cost for vet bill, the vet part of that and all that, it does add up. So in general, even when you're looking at PZP type projects, you're still in the around $1,000 a deer. The research the last 7 to 10 years has been trying to focus on how do they drive down that price. And a lot of that has been looking at the use of volunteers, so trying to get vets that do it pro bono and that kind of stuff. So that does help draw that price down.
But so that would be sterilizing, not shooting that would be bringing the deer in and performing lifelong sterilization. The PZP is a 3-year sterilization. I would imagine the cost of that would be a lot less because
You're still capturing the deer. It's not remote injection. So it's not like you shoot a dart and she gets it and then you walk away and you're done, because to that point, you would never have a marker on that deer. You could shoot that deer with 75, it'd be like us going to get our vaccine for COVID, every day of the week. If they didn't have a way of tracking who you were, you'd keep getting more and more doses. At some point, that's probably a bad thing. So when they look at those PZP or any of the drugs they're doing, they're capturing those deer. They're tagging those deer as well, so that they know which deer got, which dose when and to what level. So there is capturing involved with that. Again, they're trying to drive those prices down, but it's still pretty high.
I'm looking through my notes because I think it was in San Antonio somewhere where they were shooting them into the deer from far away, just like you would with a bow and arrow, but it's the PZP sterilization. So that's not actually capturing the deer, that is vaccinating by.
Again, research. It's research
Okay.
looking at that project. White Buffalo did not get a grant to do that project in South Euclid. A Cuyahoga County councilwoman got funds allocated through the county budget for that project. Then they went and contracted with White Buffalo to do the work.
Okay.
So she wasn't a grant. She allocated county resources to put towards the research project there to fund that. I
Couldn't
think
we
it was,
raise a grant, though, similar to that, and do some fundraising and use some city tax dollars towards?
Sure, and that's what
doing
the
something
Clifton
like that?
project did was a combo of the Humane Society of the United States put in 50%, and they got 50% in donations. So yeah, there's definitely ways, but I was just clarifying on how that project was funded.
Okay.
And then on the guaranteeing the safety, great question. So I go to lots of these meetings. I meet with lots of city leaders, and trust me, that's always the first question out of the chief's mouth is, I have, safety concerns that somebody's going to get shot, somebody's dog's going to get shot, deer runs out on the road, gets hit by a car after he's shot. Every meeting I go to, I hear the same thing. So several years ago, we actually did a survey to all the communities in Ohio that have urban archery programs and asked them all of those questions. Each year, how many times do you deal with a situation that a deer runs off the property that it was permitted to be shot on? How many times a year have you had a cat shot? How many times a year has a kid got shot? How many times a year has a house got shot? We went through all of those concerns and surveyed all the communities to kind of start quantifying that. And what I can tell you is that the most common thing that happens is the deer walks off the property, and that's only usually around 2 times per season that happens.
So you shoot it and it falls immediately, because that's not usually what I've seen videos on.
Yeah,
and
so urban deer hunting is way different. I'm gonna try to explain it, but I'm gonna, as best I can, right? If we walk outside and we see a deer, is that deer gonna run from us? Probably not. If we yell at him, is it gonna run from us? Probably not. It knows people, right? And it feels somewhat safe in town. If I go out 10 miles outside town and I see a deer on the side of the road and I yank the car over and I jump out and I start yelling at that deer, is it going to perk its ears and pay attention? Darn right it is. I keep yelling at it, is it going to start going? It's probably going to turn and start walking off the other direction. It out there does not feel comfortable where it's at. Humans, to them, are a little bit of a predator, right? In town, they're not. So when you have somebody that's shooting at a deer, they don't have this big flight mentality when they get shot. That's the only way I can explain it, because like I said, when we look at that survey data saying how many times are you having a deer that leaves the property, it's very few times per year in a program that happens. So when we looked at it, it was something like 480 years worth of programs combined through everybody that responded. And I think out of that, we ended up with 2 cats or something like that, 1 dog, no kids. I think we had 2 houses that were shot. I'm not trivializing it, saying, hey, that's nothing, because those are bad things. But what I want to do is I want to put it in perspective. we can have cars on the road and people are going to speed and people are going to cause crashes and people are going to drink and drive. It doesn't mean we stop speeding or stop driving. It's just a reality of dealing with that. So hunting does come in sometimes with some of things that happen. But one of the nice things is that when we have a city permit in place, when those situations occur, we have not only the fact that we can charge somebody if some of those things happen, right? But also, you're not doing it here anymore.
But can you charge the city? So say a deer runs out and I get into an accident and I'm fatally injured or something of that nature. To me, then the city has passed this ordinance that puts them at a huge liability. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. It's just a question. I feel like we're spending so much time talking about killing them. I wish we could focus more on ways to coexist with them because there's plenty of ways. I'd be happy to leave research with you guys on all different methods of ways that we can coexist and be happy together instead of this, in my opinion, the very last resort should be killing.
So I think the question really comes back to the city, right? Is you guys have a voice. You guys pay taxes. You guys live here. If the city asks you guys and say, hey, do you think we should do something? I don't live here. I'm not on city council. I'm not the mayor, so I can't pick the number. But for ease of conversation, say 51%. If 51% say, hey, we need fewer deer, then we need fewer deer. If 51% say, no, I'd like to see more deer, then as a city, why would I argue with that and say, hey, no, let's kill all the deer in town? No, the residents want to see more deer. So that's why when we look at management, we run it in large regard based on what the city residents' attitudes are. If the city, if there's the majority of people say we want to see fewer deer, then that guides the direction, right? Either you from a targeted deer removal, we don't remove deer, and go that route. So.
Thanks for allowing me to speak, everyone.
And just your name and address.
Lila Richardson, 1078 Alexandria Lane.
And just to comment on that last, I guess the last part of that question that she had, which was, would culling be a last resort? And you mentioned it when you opened your statement, that you generally speak to communities that culling, that a lot of things should happen beforehand. And in a newspaper article in 2014, you're quoted in almost the exact same language you used here, that there is a whole bag full of things that need to be done to see if any of those things work, and then the culling would be the last resort. Am I right there, right?
Again, I don't live here. I don't pay taxes, so my money means nothing to you guys. But if I'm in a city leader's shoes, right, I want to do things as fiscally sound as possible with the least amount of investment from the city. So if I know that targeted deer removal costs more than hunting, I would logically start with the cheaper method first. We have some communities that's all they use. They institute a hunting program, and it fixes the problem, right? It fixes the people that say they want fewer deer. The number of issues that the residents bring forth to the city council goes drastically down. In all regards, the world is perfect again.
Right, right. And I'm not disagreeing with you in any way. I'm just saying that somewhere along the line, I guess we would want to discuss what are those things that you have mentioned, not right now, but that we definitely want to get into. What are those things you said, all these things that could take place, and this would be the last resort? And I know there are some things that we have worked on. The Parks Director and the administration and I worked on a website to, that really delineated a lot of things that you could do if you were having a problem with deer in your yard and those things. And I think at some point it would be good if we took a look at that and then took a look at, because you have some expertise here that we don't have. And so when you say it's our decision, it certainly is our decision, but we're relying on you to give us some fundamental information, which you have given us, but I'd like somewhere for that to include those pre-things, the pre-things that we would do. Thank you. And let me just go to Erica, would you like to go next? Thank you. It's interesting, I know most people's names, actually. I believe I know most people's names that are here. It's not because I'm old.
From my deer comments on Facebook. Erica Graffine, 626 Cedar Street. We can't coexist. I've been chased out of my own yard. They stomp their feet, they're aggressive, they eat everything. If this says they don't eat hostas, they eat hostas. They use my yard as a restroom. I can't let my grandkids go out there without me. So it's a safety issue. So I want to be the first one to say, let them, and I understand what they said, calling is a second resort, hunting would be, people are hunting to eat. These people aren't just killing them. Do I want to be there when they shoot the deer? No. Are they going to eat it? Yes. And I want my yard back. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Yes, sir. I could pretend, right? It's great to see you.
We're going to make a new friend tonight, folks.
You'll be a friend either way.
Okay, thank you, sir. My name is Scott Johnson. I live on Shorewood Drive. You mentioned the deer population in Medina is way high. What would be the good number for the Medina city in terms of per square mile? Do you have an idea?
Again,
But let me put it another way then. If the rural is like 20, how many deer do we have?
right. So, yeah, so I said in the rural areas, we look at that 20-ish number, right? In an urban area, generally where you see the problem fixed, we're somewhere 7 to 10 deer per square mile. That's a general thing. But again, we, look at what those metrics that we're, the goals that we're trying to reach within that community and managing for that. Keep in mind that it's a lot about where things are, right? If every deer in town was out on Commerce Drive in the industrial park, nobody's having them in their yard eating landscaping, the gardens are great, probably a few deer vehicle accidents on 18 because they're out on Commerce, so maybe we get one deer vehicle accident a year. Everything's great, right? So a lot of it is about where the deer are. So when we look at density, deer densities of 20 deer per square mile or 5 deer per square mile, it really, in large regards, also matters about where those deer are. And it's not homogeneous, right? When we say 10 deer per square mile, it's not a blanket across the city. We could have pockets of more deer and less deer. And that's okay. It's okay to have 30 deer per square mile if they're not causing problems over in this part of town.
But to answer your question, just a quick thing. We had a deer count, and we just did the numbers. I think we're around 60 deer on average per square mile.
Okay.
6-0, John?
6-0, okay.
504
Now-
divide, yeah, okay. All right, thank you. That's what I got.
So, here, let me continue if I may. The hunting approach is something that sounds really good. And I have a question that the assembly here might like to know an answer to, and that is, what kind of qualifications do these archers need to have so that it's done in that safe manner? And I think that's preferable to the rifle approach.
Yeah, it's a good question. So legally in Ohio, you have to go through a hunter safety course in order to get your first license. Now that could have been 40 years ago, right? So, but that's the state qualification. When I work with communities on having an urban archery program, I typically put in there that they have to have demonstrated at the time of application a recent, and the city determines what that time frame is,
Okay.
proficiency. So whether it be hunter safety or they're a police officer or they are military that goes through training for use of firearms, because really a lot of bows are the same characteristics apply over to them as well. But a lot of that lies in the city, right? You know, what you feel comfortable with. Now, I've had cities that have done qualifications where, you know, an archer goes to a spot and shoots a target so many times, and they got to hit, you know, a target so many times before they're allowed. I don't buy into that because I go back to a conversation I had with the city of Hudson that has had a hunting program for a long time, and I met with the police chief and said, hey, out of all the years you've had a hunting program, how many times have you had somebody that didn't qualify? And he said, one time, and he said the person's bow was off, he went and got a sight and came back, and he's, yeah. So if you're setting something in place that gets that, you know, that you want to meet that, and everybody's meeting it, then it's not really a qualification. At the end of the day, there is not a person that's an archery hunter that wants to hurt somebody or hurt something, or wants to cause strife to themselves, or cause a situation where they've got to go chase a deer across 14 properties to go after that deer. An urban archery hunter wants to be safe and wants to be doing the right thing, because everything outside of that is a pain in the ass to them.
So the city could establish the criteria so that it would be safe. That, I just wanted a short answer. Yeah, thank you very much. Lay out, if you would, a scenario if there were to be a hunting that would be with archery. So I live in an area that, we have 10 to 14 deer coming through at a time, but they don't bed down in my little yard. They'll bed down in a more wooded area that's across the street and down towards Beechwood 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, and they probably live in the parks. So how would this hunt be organized in an area like ours on Shorewood Drive, where they don't bed but they frequent?
Right, so typically what I present to communities is that the hunter submits an application for the properties that they want to hunt on. So maybe it's not your place where you live, but it's, you know, this wood lot that is down the road. You've talked to them, you've gotten permission, they have to sign off on the application that you're okay to hunt on their property. You get whatever properties you want to get on the application, and obviously you want this thing to go through, right? Just like if you're building a deck, you don't want to submit a piece of paper with a quick drawing on it because it's not going to get approved. You want something that's a good plan that meets specs and is going to get passed. So as a hunter, you do the exact same thing. You're submitting something that you're comfortable with as a hunter that could be done safely, right? But you're not the final decision maker. You're just saying, hey, I think, you know, I can do it safely here. The city then does an assessment of your application on the properties that you submitted to look at, say, yes, we think this could be done safely here or not.
But I don't have to be the hunter, because I was a hunter, but I'm not, and so it sounds like you need some sort of a grassroots whatever.
Typically, yeah. So I see where you're going with that.
So yeah, I'm the property that's being damaged.
Right, but you're not a hunter.
I planted the wrong stuff in the yard. When I lived in the mountains of Maryland, I didn't have that issue. The deer were skittish, but they still ate my wild rhododendrons. But here they eat everything.
So typically, yes, you're right.
And I'm not going to hunt
Once
them.
a program gets rolling, the person that's doing the assessments learn, you know, because they're seeing who the hunters are. They're oftentimes meeting with those hunters. They learn who the people are that are hunting, and they also learn who the really good ones are.
Okay.
But there is a little bit of a grassroots kind of thing. It's got to get rolling to get that going. However, it is not uncommon that through police departments and fire departments that there are hunters within that, those folks as well. So it's typically there are people that can be identified, and hunters oftentimes will go to those folks and say, hey, if you got anybody that's interested, I'm willing.
Okay, so let's say I go to my councilman, and I say, we have a problem here. How do we organize the neighborhood to get this done? And is that a way it could happen?
Yep, just word of mouth. You talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, talk to coworkers, and you say, hey, I'm looking for a hunter. I'd like to get somebody on my property. And again, if you can't, through those avenues, which I'm fairly confident you could get somebody that would speak up, say, I know a hunter or I am a hunter, okay. You could go back to the police department. You could even come to us. You know, we sometimes can identify some people that, are in the area as well. So.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stacy?
I'm Stacy Benny from 3847 Knott's Landing. I actually live in Montville Township, so I know this doesn't affect my home, but I am for trying to preserve the life of the deer that we have by any means necessary. And I'm worried about the suffering of the deer. Isn't bow hunting, doesn't that have the potential to cause more suffering and a longer, more drawn-out death?
So much like I was talking about, the archery hunter doesn't want to hurt somebody. I guess the flip side of that could be on the deer. Their goal is to get that deer down on the ground as fast as possible. You know, they're using broadheads that are sharp and, you know, do a lot of damage. And the goal is to put it on the heart, and so that deer goes down as quick as possible.
And how often does that happen?
Most times. So one of those things that we looked at within that survey we did was how many times do you have a deer running around with an arrow sticking in it, sticking out of it. It occasionally happens, but it is not a common thing that occurs. You know, every year we see, occasional situations where there's a deer with an arrow sticking in it or something like that. But even in rural settings, it's not like you have deer running around all over the place with arrows sticking out of them. Again, you're talking about a broadhead that is sharp. And I know that kind of comes with the context of, well, I don't want, my kid to be around this sharp thing. The hunter doesn't want your kid around that sharp thing either. But the whole point of that is to put as much damage on that animal as quickly as possible to get it down on the ground as fast as possible. So, yes, I mean, typically in these urban archery programs, that's why these deer aren't going long distances, right? They're going fairly short distances on those properties that it's permitted, and falling down and dying there because that arrow has done the damage.
So my concern is that I was speaking with someone before, and we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of deer that need to be culled. We're talking about 600 the first year, possibly. What percentage of those are going to have a death of suffering? I had my exterminator over the other day, and the mother deer with her triplets, actually, who comes and visits my yard very frequently, was outside. And he told us a story about taking his son bow hunting, and his son hit the deer, and the deer cried, and it was so excruciating. He was traumatized and will never hunt again. And if that deer runs and comes on my property and is writhing in pain from this bow approach, because it seems that approach is probably not as quick as a shooting approach would be, then that becomes my problem as well.
Sure. So I know this doesn't come with solid data points. This isn't a novel thing. Hunting deer in an urban area is not a novel thing. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of communities throughout Ohio and throughout the country that have urban archery programs. I think anybody on city council, the mayor, any city leader, if they were getting these calls that, hey, another one of these damn deer, crying in this lady's yard, it's unacceptable at the end of the day. If I'm in the city leader's shoes, that's unacceptable. It can't happen. So we're fixing that problem. Either that hunter is not doing what he's supposed to be doing, you're out, or it's a bigger issue, and we're just ceasing this program right here, right now, right? There's nothing that says if the city starts a hunting program that, done, we're never changing it back, guys. We got it, it's done. No, I mean, this is an application process. If it's a problem, you just stop issuing applications or you stop approving them. So out of all these programs that are throughout, just Ohio, but let's say, throughout the country, you don't see communities abandoning hunting programs. So if those issues occurred, if we had kids getting shot with arrows, if we had all these major problems that occur because it's unsafe or because there's all these, other issues that are occurring, it wouldn't happen. But more and more communities are starting archery programs. So I don't have anything to say, those situations aren't going to occur because they certainly can. But if it was a major problem, cities would stop hunting programs. I only know of one right now program in Ohio that's ever gone back, and they're looking to reinstate it now after they've stopped it for a couple years. And and so, you know, again, if it was causing problems, the cities would just stop the programs altogether. But they seem to work fine. We don't see the problems that occur from them. We don't see deer running around with arrows. We don't see, you know, deer, dying in yards that weren't permitted, or even further dying in those yards and, you know, causing, you know, crying and having. Can it happen? Absolutely. I'll be the first person to say that those situations can occur. But it's not a problem to the extent of having to cease a program.
Are you aware if the state is looking for other cities to join research programs similar to the one in South Euclid?
I don't know. We aren't necessarily, like, I'm not out there, like, beating the drum like, hey, you need somebody else to do a research project. But because typically, you know, in research projects, it's some type of academic, right? So in the case of South Euclid, it's White Buffalo, and Clifton as well. It was White Buffalo that was doing that research as part of, you know, publishing journal articles out of it. So if the city of Medina wanted to look at, you know, a fertility project, certainly, you know, the route to go would be to reach out to universities, to reach out to, you know, those, you know, researchers and say, hey, we're looking to do a research project. Do you see anything we could do here? Again, from our standpoint, we don't want to see the same thing done over and over and over, right? If research has been done, it's been done, unless there's some different thing going on in that particular situation. Just because it's a different city doesn't necessarily mean that's different. So if the city puts something together, you know, if as you know, residents, you know, a group of 10 of you get together and are able to piece something together, provide it to the city, you know, or you can provide it to me. It doesn't have to go through. I mean, if it's going to occur in the city, I would hope the city would be involved. But you know, put that together and present it. Again, we're looking for stuff that's novel stuff that isn't stuff that's been done before. But you come up with a tactic, and that's where South Euclid is, right? Initially, it was, well, we just want to do what Clifton did, and we said we're not doing that. It's already been done. Like, that project's over, that project's done. We're now waiting to see what the, you know, long-term results of that project are. But then they came back and says, well, what if we added this lethal aspect in? And we said, yeah, then we'll go with it. Like, we're cool with that. That's a little different, right? We're looking at initial year one population reduction. They came in year two before they did that population, and they're continuing. That's the sharpshooting part is not done. They will continue doing that through the, you know, next couple years of this research project.
And if we were to do the sharpshooting program or the archery, the bow and arrow program, and we did, you know, 600 deer killed this year, how many would you expect we would have to kill the next year and the next year and the next year after that?
Yeah, good question. So in general, what we see, so when we're, especially from our targeted deer removal program, we're taking a look at those metrics, right, to see, you know, how X number affected the change in that citizen attitude, right? But I can punch that into a simple spreadsheet and say, okay, you know, here's the number of deer that we started with. Here's how many we removed. So we're at this number, you know, at the end of the winter. And then I can project what that population is going to be next fall. In general, between 1.2 and 1.3, you take that population you ended up with, you know, at the end of the winter, times it by 1.2 to 1.3, you're going to be right in the ballpark of where that population is going to be going into the next season. And so we can forecast out what that population is going to be. We know what the number reduced, how that affected our attitude, and now we know, okay, in order to get it even further, you know, if we need to go further, we need to take X number more, or hey, we can relax a little bit, we can take a few less to kind of keep at that, you know, get at that goal number. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay, so it's not like 600, like, and I would argue nobody in this town wants to see, well, I shouldn't say that because there'll probably be somebody, but almost nobody wants to see every deer gone, right? There's value in deer being on the landscape. I mean, it's cool to see deer. It's nice. It's just when they're causing problems, right? And we can do some of the non-lethal stuff, fencing, and, you know, there's some sprays. again, stuff that I can work with an individual resident on their particular situation to help address. So we can deal with stuff from a non-lethal side, certainly. But when we're dealing with 60 deer per square mile in a town, that's high. I mean, just in general, my guess is, from all the towns I've worked with, we do a citizen attitude survey, and I think the city's done that, but, we're gonna find out that a good chunk of the residents are saying, we need fewer deer in town.
Is it mostly related to traffic, accidents?
Well, I think some of that, but I think it's a citizen's response that, I put more credence in that than I do deer vehicle accidents. I know it sounds crazy, right? Because somebody getting in a car accident, not only is their vehicle damaged, it's a monetary loss. Certainly, I wouldn't want somebody to die because they hit a pole or something like that. But really, though death by a deer vehicle accident is very seldom happens. It's really the more vehicle damage. But it's the attitude of what the people in this town want, right? If you guys, and it's no different than how you guys vote on all kinds of other things, right? Is you say, hey, we don't want any more Dollar Generals in town, or, hey, this is getting, the town I live in, it's getting built out, and there's a lot of people that are like, too many developments. We need to slow this down because that's their feeling for their town of what the feeling they want to have. So I put much more stock in that, of what you guys as residents are bringing to the table, of what you think should happen within the town.
And I appreciate that. I would just urge that if we are going to survey the town, that we not ask, do we want more deer or do we not want more deer? Because I think even some people who are for some of the more humane ways of doing this believe that we need less deer. We're just trying to look for ways that don't involve killing the deer. So if we're going to ask the question, ask, do we want more deer? Do we not want more? Do we not want as many deer? And which approach do you want to try?
Fair
So,
statement, yep.
thank you.
Bill, if I could for a second.
Mayor.
I don't know why it's doing that. So just for clarification. You okay, Jared? Jeff, just for clarification, so the South Euclid study
Is he on?
is a 3 to 5 year study.
Mayor, you're not, I don't think you're on.
It's on,
You got it? Okay.
is a 3 to 5 year study, right? Not a 1 year study?
Clifton was a 3-year study that we extended out to 5 years.
This is South Euclid.
South Euclid is a 1-year study at this point, because that's all the funding that she got was for 1 year.
Well, it's funded for one, but according to the article from White Buffalo, it says it's a unique 3 to 5 year study, which is exactly my point. If it's $85,000 for the first year, I don't imagine that year 2 through 5 is going to go down. If anything, it may go up. But even using a stagnant figure of $85,000 times 5 is $425,000 on a research study to see if in fact it's going to have any effect whatsoever.
Right. Now, the ideal thing, right, theoretically, the cost does go down. We got less deer we got to do, if we did it right, and we got less deer to go after the second go-round. However, there is also a law of diminishing returns. It's easy when you got 60 does that you're going after to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? As you get more and more of them, it gets harder and harder and harder. Now when you're trying to go after the 5 that are out there that are the untagged and you're trying to find them, and it does take a little more time and effort to do that. So cost does go up per deer a little bit in looking at that. But theoretically, the price should go down, right? Because we've got less deer we got to deal with to have to go after. But again, one of the things that we, and again with the South Euclid project that we're going to look at, that Clifton did not look at, is really tracking these deer, looking at how many of these deer, how many untagged does, because they walked out of South Euclid saying we got every single doe that were there within the project area. Now, how many, are there any does that come in? Are there untagged does that show up next year? And, ultimately do any of those tagged does leave, which theoretically could open up space. So, yeah, it is kind of we look at it as a 3-year project, and we hope that this can continue, but they have not committed funding past this, because right now their hope is that none. We did 100%. we don't need to do any more. Now, what we saw in Clifton is that every year there was some more that needed to get done. I expect that to be the case in South Euclid as well. To what level, we'll find out. And when we look at Clifton, that was 1 square mile versus South Euclid, which the town is much bigger than that. Its project area is about, almost double that. And we've got a lot of different things going on in South Euclid that weren't happening in the Cincinnati area. So in the South Euclid situation, we have other deer management programs, hunting and sharpshooting going on all, around a good portion of that town as well. So there's some different dynamics going on there as well that will maybe dictate things. And I'm not, again, it's research, so we'll see what the end result is. But to answer your thing, yes, there should be, I'm expecting costs each year, but it should go down.
Thank you, Mayor. Lila, right before you go, I just want to let everybody know. Yeah, it is Lila.
Oh, you're also lying? I gotta keep him in check.
No, I love being corrected when I know I'm right.
I'll keep that in mind.
Thank you. I don't know.
Shouldn't have said that out loud.
Just before you go, I just want to let you know we're going to run this meeting till about 7:30, and there is a second meeting so that we can continue the input, for people that weren't able to attend. And then the third meeting is the voting meeting, when we will look at the two issues, the one we did talk about, which we're talking about now, the deer particularly, and then as you mentioned about the feeding thing. So I just want to kind of let you know that. I want no way at all to cut anybody off at all, but I just want to let you know about 7:30 is probably a good time to wrap up, so that everybody can get home, and we'll have a good discussion at the second meeting as well. Okay? Thank you. Lila? Yes, you may. I'm sorry.
The first line.
She's my niece. And her mother's sitting next to her. That's my sister. Hello, my name is Lila Lair. I live on 947 Sandy Lane. I have lived in this community for 49 years, so I take a great pride and interest in what's going on. I am a firm believer of coexistence. Yes, I understand that deer can be a problem. They were a problem to me, so I learned to redo my gardens. There's no hostas. Most of my flowers are non-deer friendly. If they chew a few, I don't mind. I have learned to go and look forward to every Saturday going to the farmer's market to get my tomatoes and green beans rather than planting them. I know that's not a solution for everybody. But I did discover one thing that really seems to work. And I discovered it last year, and I believe it's made in Medina, so that's a plug for the city. And I bought it at Boyards. It's either sheets that you put in the ground or roping, and the roping really works in the bushes and in my flower gardens. It's non-intrusive, you can't hardly see it, and it has kept the deer and the rabbit away from the garden. So it's just a suggestion for those people who are having so many problems. But my question to you and to the city is, when you're talking about doe and bucks, I imagine it's going to be non-discriminate who they shoot? I mean, they're not going to go after one sex, is that correct?
Are you talking about hunting or sharpshooting?
Both.
Okay. When we talk about targeted deer removal, sharpshooting, we put the emphasis on the does because the whole point is population reduction. So we focus on those to get that population knocked back as quick as possible. When you talk about hunting, it's dependent on the person, on the hunter. Some, and it may be dictated by they want fewer, want to reduce the deer population, will focus on the does. Some will focus on the bucks. It just depends.
Okay, usually the bucks are more aggressive. And my question, the second question I have, will there be an age, will you go after the babies?
Well,
I'm not saying you, but
yeah, so in hunting situations and targeted deer removal, those typically are, the hunting season is the end of September through the beginning of February. So there's no babies on the ground because we're just getting ready to go into fawning season now. When we're talking about targeted deer removal, Most of those operations start in late October, going into through March. Again, we're still stopping short well before fawning season.
You know, I just don't know how that's going to work because I live in, our properties are like 1/3 of an acre. I live between the hospital and the high school, which is heavily deer populated, especially with this, near the cemetery. And how can you get all these neighbors to agree, like you said, a group, a homeowners association or a group type of thing, to agree to something like this? It's like politics. You can live next door to someone, but someone believes one thing, the other one believes the other, and you're just not going to get it. And the property lines are so close together. I don't know how they can have a sharpshooter or a bow and arrow guy come in with these small areas. I just don't see how it can work.
So I use an example all the time of Avon Lake. So when Avon Lake started their program, they allowed deer damage permits, not out and out hunting, and then they did a sharpshooting program. From the hunting portion of it, when they started that, we expected a lot of the requests to come in from the southwest part of town, which is where they still have a little bit of farm ground in town there. But and it makes sense when you think about it, the majority of the requests came from the northeastern portion of town, which is actually heavily residential, small lots. So I remember going to a lot one time, a lady called me up and I stopped out at her place and she said, hey, I want to do it here. And I looked and I said, there ain't no way. I said, you got one little lot here. I said, now here's what you got to do. You got to go talk to the 4 people there and 2 people on this side of you and 1 person on that side of you and that lot there. You talk to them, you get them on board, give me a call. And a week or 2 later, the phone rings and she said, hey, I got them on board. So, I'm not saying that works every time because certainly
You wouldn't
there could
get
be a
me on
situation.
board.
Right, so I'm not saying it works in every situation, but again, it allows, if I'm a resident that wants to do it, right, it should be me that's advocating to you of why I want to do it. And if you say no, that's okay. That's the property rights thing, right? Fine. I may move on to some people around you, but, at the end of the day, it's, you get as good of a say as anybody else.
Okay, and then this wildlife feeding thing, and I asked Denny this, I called him up a couple years ago when you guys tried to pass this, I said, what about my birds? He goes, oh, it doesn't affect birds. I said, deer love bird seed. I said, it affects the deer too when you feed the birds. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Lila. One thing I will tell you whether I agree with this or not, and I really appreciate the concerns raised about safety, is knowing how the city operates, that between the police chief and the mayor, I can guarantee you that nothing would be approved unless there was a pretty much an ironclad guarantee that it would be fully safe, 100% safe. That I can assure you. I appreciate everybody who's raised the concern, but I know that the chief, the mayor, they would never allow this to happen in any area where they thought harm could come to anyone or anything. So I'm going to leave that at that, but thank you. Yes, you may.
I'm Sandy Hinkle, and I live at 301 East Friendship, right here in town, and I've lived in Medina almost 40 years. So this is kind of a new phenomena, the deer, that this has come to this magnitude. I remember when we first moved here, occasionally, of course, Route 18 was nothing but woods back then. Occasionally you'd see a deer and everybody would be in awe. Well now, and to give you some idea of where I live, I'm exactly about 1.5 blocks from here. So I'm right in the center of town. And I will tell you, I missed my between 4 and 5, the parade starts as they cross the street from Broadway. I don't know where they're coming from off of Broadway. And they come through my yard, and they eat. If I do have a bird feeder, and I have been thinking about that because I know that that's an issue. But I have to say that I know this meeting is about deer, but we have a big problem in this community. I mean, I have had 2 personal encounters with the raccoons, both inside my house and in my garage just last week, destroying everything. We have coyotes. During mating season for skunks, I can't open any of my windows because they are all around. So I'm here in town, and this is what I put up with on a large scale. And I'm wondering, one of the things that hasn't been addressed, they come here because, and unfortunately I have to say this, we have ourselves to blame for this. We have taken away every habitat that they've had, and so now they come where the eating is easy. And in town, I mean, we have a lot of food for them. We have restaurants. We have garbage that is loosely thrown out on garbage pickup day. I'm wondering, and it hasn't been addressed, if we actually did due diligence to not feed them at all, and that includes everybody, restaurants, everybody in this town. If we got more vigilant with that, is it possible that they would go elsewhere? And that's a question that I have.
No.
No?
Easy answer.
Now, wait a minute, I'm not just talking about food, I'm also talking about plants, I'm also talking about, because it was mentioned, we all know they love the hospice and they love stuff like that. So there are ways for us to do, things. I bought little packets last year from Greenery someplace in Broadview Heights, someone told me about it, and put them out on stakes, and they left my hospice alone. So there are some things that I'm wondering that if we can do ourselves rather than get to this magnitude. My last thing I want to say, and then I'll let you answer. It's like throwing darts blindfolded. Do we even know how many deer we have? I mean, we don't have them tagged. We don't have them marked. I mean, is there any way we can do something to begin to look at the actual numbers that exist in this community? I'm wondering, is there any type of a tattoo or something you could shoot on them so we can begin to identify what are our numbers? What are we looking at? We could be looking at the same 150 deer just recirculating all the time in our community. I don't know. But those are the things I'm wondering. And I will tell you, I'm as bothered by it. They mess in my yard. They eat everything I have. They look at, literally 3 feet away from me, and they just look at me like, I've gotten up at 3 o'clock in the morning to get a glass of water in my kitchen, and they're looking in my kitchen window. So, I know what it's like. I don't know why my yard gets infiltrated the way it does. I just sit on the corner across from the old cemetery, so maybe that, kind of is their enticement. But I think they just like my yard, period. But I'm willing to live with them if we could, or if do other things that might. We have tried nothing really, as far as I know, as a community. Bird feeders should probably be put 12 feet up. There should be a pulley pole that you could do that. So that's all I have to say.
So it's a fallacy that we took their habitat. Now, certainly we make woods not be woods, and we make impervious surfaces like parking lots, parking decks, and roads. But the reason we have so many critters in town is that we've created what they need, right? To your point of food. I get questioned all the time, what point will these deer become so plentiful that they'll be starving to death? In town, never. It's an unlimited food supply. They'll never run out of food. And to the point of raccoons and all critters, it's the same thing. We create habitat that's perfect for them, right? In the city of Medina, we've created a sanctuary where they know they're safe. So if they're getting shot at outside of town and they're not getting shot at here, where would you go, right? If you were in a bad part of town and you were getting your house broken in all the time, you would move if you could. So they know where to go to be safe. But then they get into this town where it has, into a town where there's plenty of food, and even people try to get close to them and are friendly, and and they lose that fear of people. So yeah, it's not that we took their habitat away. We changed their habitat. They just adapted to it. So there is a level of adaptation from a human standpoint that needs to occur as well, to coexistence, right? I think you had said about coexistence, 100%. Like, there is a level of coexistence. Like, there is a tolerance level that people have to, a farmer has to tolerate that deer will eat some of his corn, right? That has to be a fact. The point is trying to minimize that loss, trying to minimize the issue that those deer are causing. And so when you're dealing with a situation here where you've got unlimited food resources, they're feeling safe, they're in essentially sanctuary, the population just continues to grow. So just like, we call it exponential curve, but it starts out slow, but then it kind of takes off. And so that's what we've seen in Northeast Ohio and a lot of communities throughout the country. Back in the 1940s, when there were not very many deer in the state at all, the entire state, population slowly grew. And then all of a sudden you got into populations growing and urban centers that had no population control, because the only thing killing them was old age and cars, and I suppose disease, we could throw disease in there, that those populations just started taking off. And so over the last 15 years, it started to get worse. But really in the last 6-7 years, I have no shortage of these meetings I go to. So I'll go to the next city next month. So, it's not an isolated situation for Medina.
So you honestly think that removing the wooded areas, which was their habitat, and believe me, 40 years ago, Medina was all woods. There wasn't a lot of houses, and there wasn't a lot, we have had this, this creep to where there's no place else left to build here.
Yeah, woods are their preferred habitat. That's where they want to be.
We need to, thank you, and I don't mean to cut you off, but there will be we're going to have a second meeting to make sure everybody gets a further opportunity, but I know that Councilman Rose, I think, has got some comments. Councilman Hazeltine, other council people that are here, and not to limit you guys either, but if you could kind of keep them to, a little bit brief. And the mayor?
All right, like I say, my bedtime's 8:30, so. Can I go to 8:29?
No, you can go to 7:22.
Okay. Wow. Okay. All right. No, first of all, I want to thank everybody for being here. Good conversation, good information. I think that everybody's passionate about their side of things, and we need to get all the areas here. But I think a couple of things we're overlooking when we talk about coexisting with the deer. I did a little bit of research and had some handed to me. 350,000 people every year die in the United States from Lyme disease that's brought on by ticks. Okay? That's, if we allow the ticks, if we allow the deer here, we have that chance of spreading that to the people here in the city of Medina. We have to be very vigilant that doesn't happen here, depending on which way we go. Property damage, I'm a proud, or a not so proud, victim of 4 deer car collisions, one in New Jersey, one in West Virginia, one in the city of Akron, and one in Pennsylvania. The second one, the one in Pennsylvania, was while the first car that I hit in the city of Akron was in the shop. Okay? No, none in Medina, no. But on 77, on Interstate 77, and the damn thing jumped right over the barrier, and I didn't have nothing I could do. But the 2 deer, the 1 deer in New Jersey and the 1 deer in West Virginia, did not die instantly like the other 2 did. Lord only knows where it went, but we did see it hobble off. How long did that suffer before it finally died, or whatever, those 2 deer? So, we talk about suffering. I walked through Forest Meadows neighborhood, and I've seen I believe it's 4 different deer, I can't be sure. I know it's at least 2 different deer, where they're walking around with 1 foot like this because it got hit by a vehicle. From where? Okay. Where's the suffering here? You know, I don't minimize what happened with the young child who hit the deer with the arrow, but maybe it's because he was a young child and didn't put enough force behind the bow or the arrow to hit the deer. Okay, where the professionals that would be coming in would be using professional equipment to make sure that the kill is now and instantaneous. That would be the humane thing, as opposed to being hit by some sort of vehicle out on Reagan Parkway. So far, I forget what the statistic is, my phone's charging. We've picked up 55 carcasses in the city of Medina just this year along Reagan Parkway and other places. How long did those deer suffer before they finally died? Okay, we've got over 500 deer in the city itself. That's you know, where at what point do we start diminishing any of the returns? Okay, you know, and who here loves, or okay, who here had a hamburger, a steak, a turkey, a chicken here in the last year? Okay? Just about everybody, okay? All right? What's wrong with taking this deer meat and giving it to Feeding Medina County? All right? We have to line up a processor, but when we have these kills, we take the deer, we process the deer, we give the food away. We can't sell it, but we give the food away. Let people have meat who normally wouldn't have meat, and help human beings with this. Okay? I think that that's probably the best solution. It's a win-win. Those who like their gardens, those who like their backyards, and I'm one here that I'm really considering calling the ODNR and asking you to come and pick up the deer, because the ODNR owns the deer. We have an ordinance in the city that says the owner of the deer picks up the scat. And my yard's full of scat. And I don't think you guys have enough people to clean it all up. Okay? So this is where I believe we have to go. Okay? A win-win. We clean up our yards, we get our yards back, the hungry people get the food, and the deer that do remain have a better habitat. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Rose. Councilman Hazeltine?
I'm sorry, could you say that again? Council what?
Councilman Hazeltine?
No, she's a woman.
One last time.
She's a woman.
Councilwoman?
Thank you.
I just like being corrected.
I know, I can tell. I have to correct you a lot. So I'm just going to take this down to a very basic level based on what I'm seeing right now. Right now, we have about 15 visitors in the room, and at maximum, I've been monitoring the live feed on Facebook, and that obviously I can't take into account how many people may have watched it at home on Medina TV, but there's been a maximum of 7 people on the feed the entire time. So from my point of view, I'm looking at it, you know, there's lots of people that are very, very passionate about the fact that the deer are a problem. And I understand that just because it's not a problem for me personally does not mean that it's not a problem. But what I'm seeing right now is roughly 22 people in a city of, what are we at now?
26,000.
26,000 that care enough to come out and speak about the deer. So what I'm asking is that if the deer are in fact such a huge problem beyond the 22 people that have weighed in this evening, I want to know about it. I can't easily identify an issue. It's not like when I work with the recovery community and I can identify people from the criminal justice system or pull people that need services from here. This is an issue that you have to tell me about. And right now I have 22 people that are talking to me about the issue. I counted, we had 7 speakers go up to the podium, and it was about half and half. Half in favor of the birth control, half not wanting to kill Bambi. You know, or I'm sorry, I said that in the reverse. Half wanting, you know, a calling program, a hunting program, half wanting some sterilization methods. So it's a very tough issue without, like you mentioned, getting more city input. So the very first step that I would want to take, and I know we have a deer survey. I'm ashamed to say I don't know what's on the deer survey because I haven't taken it, because I don't have a problem with deer where I live. I would like to garner interest. Is this even an issue? Obviously, everyone in this room believes it's an issue, or you wouldn't be here. But 22 people out of 26,000, I need more than 22 people to make a decision. I need to know what people think. So I'm asking to please contact us. Please let us know if the city can develop a survey, much like we did with the comprehensive plan survey, where residents were, it was available all around town, QR code, scan it, take the survey. I need more metrics than the 22 people in this room before I can make an informed decision as to what the residents want. Sir?
I found out about this meeting this morning by accident. I subscribed to the Medina newsletter, but I didn't see anything in the newsletter about this meeting.
I will
The
tell-
meetings are put in public record. Kathy, do you know when this meeting went out? This, 14th, yeah.
Where do I get this if I don't get it from the newsletter? I don't get the newspaper.
I think it's on the city website.
So you have
Is
to
that
go to
right?
the website every day to find something out. Why wouldn't it be in the newsletter if it's that important?
We don't do the newsletter. Well, committee meetings, and just as, when you're speaking, we just really need your names, but when committee meetings are set up at a council meeting, and they are frequent, and the newsletter probably, clearly, they don't always mesh, but it's a good point, and that's the reason that I scheduled 3 meetings to have this discussion. We'll promote the next meeting, and then at the 3rd meeting, that is when we'll vote, so that everybody has an opportunity. I have a letter I need to read before we go
Oh,
around.
I'm sorry, just very quickly. I will tell you that if you do utilize social media, I do have there's a City Hall Facebook page. There's also my personal one where I do put all of the meetings. You can also give your information to our council clerk, and that agenda and everything that goes out will come to your email. As soon as it is announced, they give you the legally required amount of notice. So you would be able to find that out sooner.
Put that notice in the newsletter that
We don't do the newsletter.
Yeah, that would be an economic development
That's not
department.
us.
That does that. It's an economic development newsletter, so that,
same kind of newsletter, then that's communication.
It is, but that's put out by the Economic Development Office, and
we can
yeah,
certainly convey that
I'm sure
message.
they can do it. I have a letter that I need to read into the public record from Shirley Ann Walker, who is at 426 South Broadway Street, Medina. Her letter says this: I cannot attend the meeting tonight due to a knee injury. Would someone read the comments for me? Thank you. First of all, I could not comment on Bill Lamb's Facebook post. I did read them and enjoyed almost all but a few. It seems that most of the commentators are in agreement about the deer herds in our town. The deer seem accepted here. They are traveling deer groups seen here and there, including my yard and where they are welcome. The herd seems stable, healthy, recognizable, and cared for. I have seen the crooked-legged doe in my yard also. She gets around. For the fellow with 6 deer hits, I have the same comment for you as for others. Are you doing the safe 25-mile-an-hour city speed limit? Are you looking for deer as well as people crossing, cyclists, children rolling toys in the street, and other obstacles day or night? Question mark. Remember, when there is one deer crossing the street, the others will follow shortly. This is the same for children, ducks, and geese. Give them the road. Don't try to run animals or fall down, as I recently observed someone do on East Smith Street. What were you thinking, sir? And your speed limit, be kind. Fencing is an option for every homeowner. I say this particularly to the persons who bought their homes near a city park or metro park. Wild animals are to be expected in these areas. Fence to keep your yard free of wildlife, that is understandable. I like where I live, by a wooded area. I like the animals that visit here nightly. I tell them often that they are safe in my yard to nap, leave their babies, lay their eggs, build their nest, eat my plants, LOL. I don't want to change telling them that forever. We can live peaceably with the deer and wildlife. Shirley Ann Walker. Thank you. Other council members in the room, Councilman Simpson, anything you want to add?
One quick question. We do have probably more parks than any other community our size in the state of Ohio getting away from medical parks. Is there
Okay, no.
Give him.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman?
Oh, thank you.
I appreciate all the different comments, and as Arden mentioned, I do live across the street from the park, and my yard is destroyed. They are beautiful animals, but I have spent hundreds and hundreds of dollars to try to save my plants. I specifically buy plants that are supposed to be deer resistant and not. Like Erica, I've got piles of deer in my yard. The dogs eat it, it's everywhere. I love the animals, they're beautiful. They have babies in my yard. And I do recommend, I tell anyone that comes to my house to visit me, okay, be careful when you leave because the deer are out. And so you need to drive slow and look for them. And I can't tell you the number of times I've been driving in Medina, I see a deer out of the corner of my eye, I slow down because yes, it's one coming and then there's always another one. So it's a problem we need to figure this out.
Thank you. Council President Coyne, are you good? Okay. Chief, anything? No. Mayor? Okay. What? Nino? Okay. I didn't think you had anything. I skipped over you. Well, listen, I do appreciate everybody coming, and I will...
Jared has something.
Yeah, sorry, Bill. I just wanted to chime in from Facebook. We just had a comment from Dolly Aller, just requesting that something should be done besides putting it off. The topic has been on the agenda for years, so just wanted to convey some of the comments we were getting from Facebook.
Thank you. The topic actually has not been on a council agenda for too many years. It has been discussed for many years. I think it's important to keep in mind that the information that I have, I believe, is that there were 8 registered complaints in 2021, 8 registered complaints in 2021. And in the past month and a half, I've had plus 50 complaints about the installation of the fiber optic cable. And I think it's also important to keep in mind that the number of accidents in town, car accidents, straight out car accidents, is about 800 in 2021. The number of accidents that involved a deer were 17. So I think it's when we have this discussion, it's important to try to define what does issue mean. What does it mean when we say we have an issue? And how do we quantify that so that we know it actually is an issue? And I think Councilwoman Hazeltine's comments about the survey, I think are on target. I think something we need to consider looking at as we go forward with this. But I appreciate everybody that came. The comments were all great.
Absolutely.
The turnout. Whatever you believe, I hope you spread the word to your neighbors, your friends, other folks.
Please tell me.
And
Please go.
we will announce and make sure we will make sure that the next meeting is better publicized, so that we can ensure that everybody who has a voice has something to say. So I hope you have a good evening, and thank you very much.